Welcome for another battle report. This time it's going to be Cultists versus Infernal Dwarfs. So you might have seen my previous video on the Cultist book. I discussed it a little bit and I got some inspiration for running Cultists myself based on my Dread Elf collection and some models that I had for War Machine Crick's army. So if I use some correct movement traits, I can get away with using these models as demons, I think. So this is the army that I'll be playing. I have 3x15 cultists with an unholy conduit. This gives them a standard bearer with demonic summon, so basically this enables you to summon demons in the cultist army book. And as you can see, the army roster also includes some demons. These are the demons I can summon. The amount of demons is going to be limited to this amount of demons, so there's no unlimited spamming or anything going on there. So what is going to start on the board? It's just the cultists and the possessed and my cult leader and the demon symbiote. So these possessed guys, they're basically demons, men, elves, something in between. So they do have basic human stats for an elite human, and then with the Wayward Children upgrade you basically go to the elven stats, so they get an extra movement, extra march rate, and they get an extra agility. And they do have unstable, they do have supernal actually, and a 5 of Aegis, so they're basically half demons. Yeah. Then for my opponent he has Infernal Dwarfs, so he's playing a bit of a different list than before, so he's stepping a little bit away from the magic with only Wizard Adept on Pyromancy. I think this is generally not enough, and you need at least Magical Heirloom on this prophet. He wanted to try out the Overlord on the Great Bull of Shamut. I think it's an interesting model, but it's also really expensive, so it has to find a way to either earn its points back or in a team tournament setup. It has to keep its points on the table at the end of the game. It's anyway an interesting army, so let's see how it goes on the table. But first an army pick of the cultists that I'm playing. So as you can see, I'm using just Dread Elf Spear guys as my possessed. They shouldn't have shields, but well, I'm not gonna rip off all my shields of my guy just to play this army. Then in the back we have a random collection of models to represent the cultists. We have on the right the cult leader with red hair and a demon symbiote with a very tall weapon. And all the way in the back you see the models that I'm going to use as the demons. So these are just models from a War Machine Crick's army. They have round bases, but with some correct movement traits, I think I'll manage to play them as demons. Yeah, then let's go into the game. And here you can see how the deployment turned out. As you can see, the cultists and the Infernal Dwarfs have already deployed. Was a little bit late with turning on the recording, but that's hopefully fine for you guys. So I did get the chance to get the first turn with my cultist because my opponent didn't fully deploy everything yet. And I think if you're playing against cultists, it's really important to just drop the first opportunity you get, because well, the cultists, they can't really pose a lot of threats defensively, in the sense that the units they start on the board with, they are quite limited, and over the turns you get more units, you get more board presence. So if you're a fast army and you can just smother them before they really get to develop their army, then you're in a good spot, I think, or at least you have the chance of being in a good spot. So I started with my turn. I spread out my 2 units of possessed to just put some pressure as much as I can on the overall board. And then the cultist units are in the back. So the middle one contains my cult leader with the Inspiring Presence 18-inch bubble. And in my first turn, well, I don't have any ranged. I don't want to go forward towards my opponent really enthusiastically, because this will open up some lines for my opponent and open the flanks of my units. So I just laid back a little and summoned the Blazing Glory. So in the first turn of the game with the Cultists, you can only spend up to 2 field tokens to summon demons. You have to summon them within 12 inches of your Cultists, so you can already sacrifice a unit of Cultists to just go fully forward to deploy something on the flank. I could have done this with the topmost unit, and I actually didn't really have a reason not to do it, so maybe that's a mistake of my part. But in the end I didn't do it. So I just deployed the Blazing Glory, and I don't know if this was the right call to make in the end. And then it's my opponent's turn. He's playing Infernal Dwarfs, but he's coming to get me in this setup, which is kind of strange for Infernal Dwarfs, I think, because normally they're quite a defensive army. Unless you play with 2x6 Kadeems with a big block of Tauruks, you can play a very offensive Abyssal Dwarf army, I think, but this is not it. Yeah, so my opponent just comes a little bit towards me, tries to soften me up with some shooting. He is facing the issue that I'm only fielding infantry models so far. He's also facing infantry models, so basically his shooting is being hampered by himself being in the way of his targets. So either giving me soft cover or even hard cover, so most of his shots actually miss. Then in my turn I'm able to connect the charge with the Possessed into his Tauruks, his Tauruk Anointed. I do charge from a ruin, so I have to take some dangerous terrain tests, but it's infantry, it still has a 5 Vegas. So it's a charge that my opponent didn't really see coming, I think. But there was like 12 inches between us, so it's only a 6 on the dice for these Possessed. So that's quite good. Just these Possessed having movement 6 with the Wayward Children upgrade is also really good. So previous turn I popped the Blazing Glory out in order to be able to move it up this turn and then double up my pressure on the flank there by also summoning yet another unit of demons. And yeah, that's a really funny mechanic, just the general principle of summoning the demons. Because as you can see in this army layout now, basically my opponent is just coming towards me. I think this is that is something that's normally quite obvious for any opponent to do. So in any game, most people just go right for their opponent, and you kind of try to pressurize the army that your opponent is playing. In this case, though, I think that maybe it's even better to widen your arc a little bit because of the summonings of the demons. So as you can see on the top, I can put some Raisin Beasts on the board. On the bottom, I can put some Myrmidons on the board, and they're both in positions where they kind of go for a flanking maneuver onto my opponent's lines. So these Brazen Beasts at top, I don't think I actually put them in the right spot here, but it's kind of hard to play these models in an army like this. Brazen Beasts in general, they really have to get the charge to shine, and otherwise their damage output is severely hampered. So a flanking position like the one on the left is actually quite good for these models. But my opponent also has some far-reaching models, like his character on the Flying Bull, like the Kadeems. And the Kadeems, they might actually not win the grind against the Brazen Beasts, but still they will inflict quite a lot of damage. So I don't really want to lose a lot of models on that. So my opponent, he tried to put the Infernal Engine into my Possessed. Unfortunately, the Infernal Engine has the rule that targets for charges have to be in its front arc enabled to in order to connect the charge, unlike a steam tank. So he just has to stay away 1 inch from me. And generally, I would say that this game so far is going a little bit in my favor. So my opponent doesn't have the combat units that he needs to mop up my Possessed units, because these guys in the end they really strike hard. and his shooting can't effectively deal with my demons because, well, they're not on the board yet, and they only go on board just one turn before they can fling into something. So that's a really interesting dynamic. So I think generally combat armies are better suited to handle cultists than shooting armies. And obviously shooting armies will still hurt the possessed quite a bit. But if you start shooting cultists, then, well, nobody will care really. So yeah, normally if you're out of the general's range with the cultists, they have to take a discipline test on discipline 6. With the cult leader with the Master of Ritual upgrade, he goes to discipline 9, so you do have a discipline 9 roll. So if they don't make it, then they go outside of the bubble, then you're a bit in trouble. But otherwise, you should be fine. Yeah, so yeah, this is what the board looks like now. So my opponent is able to move out of arc of the Brazen Beasts on top, and I actually should have been able to see this coming. So I can charge his Wolf Riders with my Brazen Beasts, but then probably they will flee. My Brazen Beasts will have likely a failed charge. I actually should have charged there, but then still the character of my opponent on the bull will be able to charge afterwards the Brazen Beast in the flank, and that's also going to mob him up. So it doesn't really matter if I stay there or not. I could. What I did in the end is that I charged him with the cultists, because I believe that the cultists should also be able to mop up the hobgoblins, which they eventually did. So in the end, I didn't really lose anything there, but yeah, having these 2 units of Brazen Beasts in the army did hamper me a little bit in the options that I had. And I experienced that the Cultist army in general doesn't really have any solutions to gigantic models. Like single models that just fly around like this Great Bull. You don't have any bolt throwers, you don't have any snipes. So I could play Occultism and could play more units with the Hereditary spell. But still the Hereditary is on a 4+, so if you start one-dicing it, you'd rather have a +1 to cast, because otherwise it's just 50-50 to see if you can get the spell off. So yeah, I think in later iterations I'm gonna try out Titan Slayer chariots. So these are chariots that should be meant to knock out gigantic models or at least models with towering presence in the opponent's army. Because I do find in this game particularly that I'm lacking the capability of doing so. So what else is happening? So my possessed, they slammed into the demon engine. The cultists on the left of them are just hiding from my opponent's army basically under the cover of his own models. I put down another unit of Brazen Beasts in a spot where my opponent can't charge them because his hobgoblins are facing my possessed and his other hobgoblins are facing my other unit of possessed. Earlier the possessed, they just cleanly went through his unit of Taruk. So these possessed are quite amazing because they have 2 attacks each with strength 4, but you can give them an upgrade to go to strength 5. They have a demon Aegis save and they start on agility 4. So with the Wayward Children upgrade you go to agility 5. You can give them spears, so on the charge you're still agility 6, and if they are charged you go to agility 7, which is high. So if you play them in with spears 6 wide and your opponent charges in, you're gonna have 25 attacks including champion at strength 5, which is a lot, and with spears you have AP 4 now. So that's gonna rip apart a lot of units in there out in the game. The only downside is that they have offensive and defensive 2, so that's really low, so a lot of stuff will hit them on 4+, and they might struggle to deal with characters. There's not a lot of rank and file infantry or cavalry or whatever that has defensive 6 or higher, so they normally will still hit on a 4+. And with Avocation and Divination as dex, you have no Dynamy, you have reroll to hit, and you have the stars line for another reroll to it. So I also have a unit of hoarders in this army, and I'm still trying to figure out what their role should be in this army. Like, they're a unit that costs about 400 points, and you can drop them in front of an enemy unit and they'll stick for some time. But in the end, it's 16 wounds to resilience 5, 5 of Vegas, which is decent. But there's still some things in the game that can just blow through easily. And I'm wondering whether it's not just better to have a deploy that is way cheaper and that you can also just pop somewhere because of the demonic summon rules to chaff up your opponent. Because as a static combat block, I don't really think they are worth it. Because you would have to spend like a lot of points to get 6 of them. And at that point you're looking at a unit with strength 4, AP 0, which is, yeah, if you're running into cavalry, then the cavalry is likely going to grind you down, which is a problem. Yeah, it's not good. I don't know if they really bring value to the table, especially in demons. So demons, they lack a little bit of AP. So the Blazing Glory has a lot of AP. Yeah, that's most of it. Then you also still have the Clawed Fiends. They have AP 2, but AP 2 is also not really a lot. Usually it's the Greater Demons that also bring a lot of AP to the table, but in this setup you can't. You don't have access to them, so you do have a bit of a problem in terms of AP. Like if you run into Britannia, then it's going to be a really difficult game for sure. Also because probably you're not going to be able to get on the flanks with your infantry, even with the 12-inch summon, because of the footprints of the units that you also put down. Because the entire footprint has to be within 12 inches of your standard bearer. So that would still be an interesting game to test out once, how this army plays against Britannia. Probably you will have to play your cultists really wide, but then you start having discipline issues. There's always still the option of just scouting with the cult leader outside of a unit and then just hiding him behind some terrain and summoning a unit within 12 inches of the cult leader. Especially with the Scurrying Veil, you can still march 20 inches and just drop something behind the enemy lines, which is really interesting. In turn 1, however, you can only do that with a unit of up to 400 points. If you have a big unit in your army, you can also do it in a later turn and just drop that unit from your cult leader. But with respect to the hoarders, I think they're a little bit of a weird duck in this format, because either you want to just chaff up your opponent with something cheap, basically, or you want to flank him and go on the offensive. But you don't really need an anvil that is really sturdy, because you already have these 2 units of possessed. So at least in this army they are not really necessary, I think. So the possessed are slowly grinding down the demon engine. The demon engine only has 3 up armor save, I believe. So with the spears and the AP2 of the strength 5 guys, I have a total AP of 3. So there's nearly no armor left anymore on the demon engine. So actually it should have been gone already earlier, but my opponent managed to squeeze in a block of hobgoblins. But the funny thing is that these possessed, they still have 2 attacks each. They still have a demon, 5 of Aegis. I still have a hero in there, and even if my opponent does manage to make me test on a break test, if I fail the break test, I'm just unstable. So I remove a couple of wounds and I just continue as if nothing has happened. So in terms of unit value, the unit value for possessed is incredible. Yeah, so the state of the board now is quite okay for me. I'm basically winning the fights that I want to win, and I'm evading the fights that I don't want to fight. So my opponent has this dwarf on the giant bull. He's all the way on top. He got rid of the blazing glory of the brazen beasts, but I couldn't get away with these. It's a combination of the large footprint of the unit and just the restriction of having to summon within 12 inches. That makes it difficult to summon it in a position where it's both safe for your enemy and where it has the potential to charge out. So it only has advanced 8 plus maximized charge. There's quite likely something in the enemy army that can threaten them, and if it can go on to their flanks, then you're not going to catch it anymore. So I'm not really a big fan of those. Especially because in the Demon Roaster you also have alternatives that they don't hit equally hard on the charge, but that grind a bit better. So most notably looking at a unit of Clawed Fiends, for example. They do lack a strength against non-large models, but otherwise they grind better. A unit of 6 has about the same footprint, has 18 attacks. A unit of Brazen Beasts has on the charge 15 attacks. You both get 3 stomps, so the Clawed Fiends, they are a little bit more expensive, but they do have more wounds. They do benefit more from reroll to wound, reroll to hit, I think. And they are less dependent on the charge, so they can grind down units way better than these Brazen Beasts. And of course the Brazen Beasts, they are a bit cheaper, but yeah, I think it's worth it to go for the Clawed Fiends next time. Yeah, so the rest of the Cultist army is just moving up a bit. The Possessed are dishing it out with Hobgoblins and with the Dwarf Warriors all the way on the bottom. And yeah, this is where my opponent's dice are crazy hot. So he has a BSB, he's hitting me on a 3+, he has a Wizard who's hitting me on a 3+. For some reason the Wizard has 3 attacks too. I didn't know that Infernal Dwarf Wizards had 3 attacks, but this one has. And then the Warriors, they have a total of 9 attacks because they're still a champion. And he does like 5 kills whilst he hits me on, he does hit me on 3+. I do have a 5 of Aegis, so his dice are quite okay, whilst my dice, they're really shit in this matchup. So I do kill like a couple of guys, but it's definitely not enough to keep my unit going. Which means that in the end I'm losing that grind. But yeah, if you look at the rest of the board, the Possessed on the top left are still grinding on. And yeah, my other demon units, they are basically just escaping from his expensive character and able to mob up the rest of his army. So he still has some shooting support, he still has 2 ballistas, but the ballistas in this matchup, they don't have prime targets. On the other hand, they're only 95 points, so even if they only manage to shoot down 1 hoarder, then they made back their points. And the Titan Mortar basically has a very nice opportunity for shooting down expensive demon stuff. But must say I was quite lucky this matchup with the rolls on my opponent's Titan Mortar. He didn't roll a lot of hits or a lot of shots for them, and then it didn't result in a lot of wins eventually. So we do manage to mop up the blunderbuss warriors of my opponent. And then the funny thing here is that the hoarders, they do only have advance 5, but as they are still beasts, they do have swift stride. So actually the distance to the hobgoblins is not that big in the end, so it's still a viable charge there. Yeah, then we go to the combat with the hobgoblins. My 8 possessed that are still left, they dish out some damage, and my opponent tries to whittle them down, but he doesn't manage to. And then we go to the Myrmidons against the Kadeems. So the Myrmidons, they do have an unhinged jaw, which means that they have a +1 strength against, or they have a reroll to wound against large models. It's one way to set up your Myrmidons. I quite like it because they Well, they are only AP1 from themselves. So the other upgrade that you could go for is to have the Pearson spike, which I think is interesting. Then you go to AP2, so you're also able to deal with knight units. But like this, they're set up to be real monstrous infantry, and I don't know if it works against gigantic actually. But monstrous infantry colors, then I think it's something valuable to have. So the only bad thing would be to face knights again. But then again, the possessed, they do have AP4 if your opponent charges into them, and AP3 another round. So that should be sufficient normally. But we will see in upcoming matches. Yeah, so by this time my opponent still has his war machines available to shoot at my hoarders, so they're gonna take some damage. And yeah, even if you have just a unit of Furies instead of these two hoarders, I think if my opponent shot at some Furies, the outcome would have been kind of similar. And the Furies, they have an advance of, I don't know, something like 10 inches, so they get a guaranteed charge into a war machine. So whilst they may not, I think they will actually even mop up a Titan mortar. So if you shoot at Furies long range, well in this case short range, you still have hard target 1, so the ballista stay on the 5. Titan mortar is gonna hit also on 5s. So out of all the shots you're gonna have a couple of hits, like maximum of 3 even. You're gonna wound 3 times. You're gonna make an Aegis, so you lose 2 Furies. You have 3 Furies left to charge one of your opponent's war machines. That's probably enough to mop up one of them at least. So yeah, compared to the Hoarders, you provide a chaff piece in the same way as with the Hoarders, but you also have a unit capable of chaffing in later turns, more flexible. Yeah, so my possessed, they actually don't need the charge of the brazen beasts to mob up the hobgoblins, and the hobgoblins they fail their steadfast check, and then we get some dice rolling to do the combat with the hobgoblins on the bottom against my myrmidons. So they do strike down a couple of myrmidons because they have spears, so they get to fight in 3 ranks. Myrmidons, they do strike quite nicely when they can strike first, but if they have to take damage first, then their potential goes down quite rapidly, because they also only have, it's basically just like the possessed, only the possessed have way higher agility than the myrmidons, and they have a smaller base size, so they usually can strike with more guys, and they have an extra attack. Yeah, so possessed are way better than myrmidons basically. Yeah, so we have a charge of the cultists on top to the bolt thrower. I mean, they didn't have any other job in life anymore other than to try and go for this charge. Basically, this is nearly the end of the game. I still mop up the hobgoblins at the bottom, and I believe this is turn 5, but we declare to end the game here because it was getting a little bit late. So just for points, we still count that I have the BSB and the wizard. I don't believe we counted the Titan mortars or the ballistas anymore, but everything that my opponent still has is his incredibly expensive character and some war machines, so that's like 1500 points. Whilst I have lost half the possessed, a unit of brazen beasts, my blazing glory unfortunately, and that's about it. So that's a clear win for the cultists. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any comments or suggestions for the army, please let me know, and I will hopefully see you the next time.